Modern Money Primer blog number 46. Responses by L. Randall Wray. Sorry, late yet again. One more week of teaching and then things should be less hectic. Note, I had planned for 52 Modern Money Primer blogs, and we are nearing the end. But it looks like we'll need a few more. I'm going to be a bit lazy this week, cutting and pasting the comments and providing brief responses. Number 1. Since unemployment is a systemic failure, aren't the only questions that need to be asked 1. How much monetarily are we to compensate these people for the loss imposed upon them by the economic system? 2. Whether it is better to pay them to do something useful and add to society, or just pay them for sitting around doing nothing much. Otherwise, the economic system surely relies on starving some people out of the way, either to an early grave or another jurisdiction. Answer. Agreed with the sentiments. Just add this. The job guarantee is a buffer stock, so it actually helps the private sector employers too. Number 2. Isn't the management of a job guarantee program from the federal point of view pretty much the same as the management of a benefits program? You work out whether somebody is entitled and pay them. Same issues with both really. One is means testing, which requires a lot of checking and rules. The other is whether they are doing some work that is of use. Seems to me that the overhead of both is pretty much the same. Here in the UK, we're implementing the universal credit system, which requires real-time, that is, every payroll period, work hours data to be collected from every employer in the country so that top-up tax credit benefits can be adjusted in real time as well. Add file a nil paid timesheet from non-private sector organization and we'll pay it instead to the rule set, and you have a job guarantee. Answer. You can design the job guarantee to minimize federal government overhead, etc., but that pushes it onto some other organization such as state and local government, not-for-profits, co-ops, or private firms. It is simpler to pay people to stay home than to organize projects. Of course, as I've argued, having them work has many, many social and private benefits over welfare. Number 3. I've been an advocate of full employment programs since I read Harvey's book several years ago, but I have a few questions and a comment. Would the counter-cyclical effect of a job guarantee be limited due to a cap on non-wage spending? Do you recommend that a job guarantee also be supported by increased permanent public employment and public skills development programs as recommended in Coffey's 2008 report, Creating Effective Labor Markets, a New Framework for Regional Employment Policy? Also, a comment, by requiring matching funds by local entities, this may prevent job creation in areas where the local government is unwilling to match funds. Of course, funding to nonprofits and worker cooperative would get around this problem. It seems that a job guarantee allows choices for people whose local government is unwilling or unable to employ them. People can pass their local government and request funds. As opposed to seeing this as circumventing local control, it could rather be understood as allowing people the opportunity to liberate themselves from local entities, brute luck, and a local electorate which does not share their opinions. A job guarantee would offer opportunities to people who are not in agreement with the local opinion. Thus, a minority group of people who are not budget hawks could be fully employed, while their local government cuts spending to meet the desires of the majority. A job guarantee thus adds options and does not limit them. Of course, local business may dislike the competition, but whoever said business liked competition? Answer. First, yes, there are other counter-cyclical programs in addition to the job guarantee, and yes, it might be necessary to raise taxes or cut non-job guarantee spending if inflationary pressures arise due to excessive aggregate demand. However, as a general observation, Virtually all developed capitalist economies operate with excess capacity, and so this would rarely be needed. Second, the matching funds element is only a proposal for the non-wage costs to prevent, say, a non-profit from getting lots of new federal government paid for equipment, buildings, autos, etc. If they really need these things, they ought to put up some of the funds. If they cannot do so, they should create jobs with very low non-wage costs. Our first priority is jobs. Second is providing community service. We want to keep the incentives aligned. Third, I do not agree that we should expect local government to undertake every possible project of positive social value using its own local tax revenue. That will not work for fairly obvious reasons. So yes, I would let them propose job guarantee projects. If they prove useful, then there could be local citizen pressure to convert these to regular public employment. However, I do prefer not to profit projects by local community service organizations. It might not prove sufficient. Number 4. The idea that a local government might opt not to participate is interesting. If such a thing is common, maybe the federal or state government would have to make it an offer they can't refuse. Tie it to other revenue-sharing programs, for instance. If the overhead allocation is sufficient, I don't think this would be a big problem. I think most local officials would welcome a cost-free opportunity to expand their empires. The program should not compete with private business, either for workers except by setting a floor under wages, or for output. It is for people that private business is not willing or able to employ. Answer: I don't think any particular government or not-for-profit should be required to participate. Requirements would reduce buy-in and lead to poorly run programs. I do agree, as I've argued before, that projects should not compete with the private sector. Number 5. There is no justification for believing that the market can do everything and that the market test is the only test of value. Straw man alert. Even the most ardent free market advocates acknowledge a role for government and the existence of social costs and benefits not reflected in market prices. Only anarchists want no government. If you want to start a campaign against anarchy, you have my support. Answer: we will see how many ideologically motivated commentators will object that the market test is the only one that matters. In my experience, it is always a major claim made. And waiting for Ralph's response. I find it necessary to continually point out that narrow market efficiency is not the only test, and I never hear our free marketeer friends acknowledging that most new firms fail. That is to say that most market experiments are failures. Thus, that a few government failures should be accepted. Rather, they seize on every single government failure as proof government can do nothing right. Number 6. There is no justification for believing that the market can do everything and that the market test is the only test of value. I don't think it's straw man. I've seen conservative politicians and pundits claim this or something similar many times. Economists are more careful about this, but there's no way the federal government would have done all the outsourcing it's done over the past 30 plus years at a cost much in excess of what civil servants would have cost if people didn't believe something like the above proposition. Answer: I agree with Joe. It may not be so in every country in the world, but this is the reality in the U.S. Number 7. Something similar. Yes, I would say that most things the free market can do acceptably should be done by the free market. The price mechanism is the most efficient and effective way to allocate resources to their highest use. I hear politicians say that often too. This is not the same as advocating everything to be done by the free market. I have never heard a politician advocate doing away with the police and the courts and allowing free market vigilantes to enforce the law and mete out penalties. Maybe the SEC would be a good beta test candidate, though national defense is another, and there are others. The Constitution lays out several powers delegated to the federal government. I know of no proposed amendments to remove any of them. In fact, the trend has been a transfer of power from the people and the states to the federal government, ignoring the Ninth and Tenth Amendments. If I may be allowed a criticism of Professor Wray's style, I think he sometimes weakens his arguments by overgeneralizing, using absolutes when clearly the absolute is false, and the truth is writ in shades of gray. My comment is more about his style than about whether central planning is better or worse than a free market. Answer: I disagree with much of that. There is no such thing as a free market to leave things to be done by. All economies are planned. The only questions are, by whom, for whom. Truth is not writ in shades of gray. I admit truth is hard to divine, however, and of course, we all need to be suspicious of anyone who claims to have found it. Number 8. It's not clear to me who are the project managers to whom you refer, or that matching funds from where should be required for non-wage costs. If you're thinking of current local government managers, I would not want them creating projects because of this program. If the local government wants to do a project, they should do it regardless of the existence of a job guarantee, and it should be justified and funded like all other projects. I have in mind existing organizations already doing the projects, but struggling to do more for lack of volunteer labor. If they are properly vetted, I'm not worried about giving them funding for the overhead of the additional job guarantee workers and activities. As for matching funds, remember, we are talking about a program to be funded by a monetarily sovereign government, but carried out by monetarily non-sovereign entities. They have not the option to simply spend more money. They must have an income from somewhere else, either taxes in the case of a local government or donations in the case of a nonprofit. Requiring them to net spend money to implement this program surely will reduce their willingness and ability to participate, and more so when funding is harder to come by, which is when the program is most needed. Matching funds is a pro-cyclical idea, tending to defeat the effect of a counter-cyclical program. Independent audits would be a better way to monitor for fraud, and as a side effect would eliminate any requirement for public discourse on the names of job guarantee participants. The auditors should be paid by the federal government, not by the auditees, as is the common practice in commercial audits, so as not to duplicate the conflicts of interest in that system. Answer: I thought I made this clear. I'd let local, state government, plus not-for-profits and possibly worker co-ops propose projects. Once approved, federal government provides wages to job guarantee workers. There will be supervisory staff plus materials costs. The question is how much of that the Fed government ought to cover. I'd put a limit, say 25%, the number used in Argentina and in the U.S. New Deal, with the rest matching funds from the project manager. I see no easy way to separate what a local government would do anyway versus what it will do with job guarantee workers funded, since the main barrier to local projects is money. Number 9. I do not agree that we should expect local government to undertake every possible project of positive social value using its own local tax revenue. Nor do I. Local governments operate like our Declaration of Independence says, with the consent of the governed. Just as I cannot afford every possible product of benefit to my family, local governments will not have consent to raise taxes enough to afford every possible project of positive social value. People will prioritize and do what they feel are the most beneficial and, yes, cost-effective projects. I have a feeling that even the job guarantee with full employment, there will still be a list of project proposals of positive social value that aren't getting done, because they lose out to other projects of greater social value that can be done with the same resources. My Econ 101 teacher said that economics is the science of unlimited wants and limited resources. My Econ 101 teacher was a huge free marketeer, and he often pointed out that 4 out of 5 new businesses fail in the first 5 years. The only thing he said more often was, "There is no free lunch." This is destructive. This is creative destruction, and is the essence of capitalist free market advancement. It is not a failure of the system, any more than the hundreds of light bulb designs that failed before Edison invented a light bulb that worked. I'm having trouble picturing a failure of a job guarantee project. Okay, if you build a bridge and it falls down, maybe, but I don't think bridge building is an appropriate job guarantee project anyway, since the main objective is to employ people. The only way to fail is if you gave a project and no workers showed up. I guess it comes down to the idea of what projects should be part of the job guarantee. It's difficult to fail if your objective is sending job guarantee volunteers out to work with Habitat for Humanity or the food bank. Corruption, I suppose, could be considered a failure. I was thinking we would still need lower taxes, even with job guarantee. If we lost 5 million, 50 if we lost 5,050,000 jobs, if we lost 5,050,000 jobs in the recession, replacing them with 5,000,000 $8 an hour jobs is not enough to get back to where we started. Answer: please sue your Econ 101 teacher. Looks like sheer unadulterated nonsense was taught to you. That explains a lot. Free lunches and low-hanging fruit are everywhere. Grab them. That is what Econ 101 ought to teach. Economics is not the study of scarce resources and unlimited wants. Indeed, both of those get it back asswards. The most important resource, labor, is always non-scarce and unemployed in all capitalist economies. And in any case, resources are socially created, not given by nature. Wants are also socially created, not innate in homogeneous globules of desire, as Veblen put it. Failure. Yes, corruption, unfinished projects, projects that are not seen by the community as useful, projects that do not allow for improvement of worker skills and advancement, etc. Our ultimate objective is to make job guarantee workers more employable and to provide the community with useful projects. So failures are possible and indeed will occur. Number 10. What do you know about the corruption surrounding India's job guarantee program? That was a topic on one of the blogs I read the other day. I can't remember exactly where right now. Every other job guarantee program and their troubles will be used against the idea here at home. I like the idea of direct pay via Social Security. No middlemen touch the money. Oh, I like the idea of direct pay via Social Security numbers. No middlemen touch the money. Answer: read papers about India's program at www.levy.org. One of my students is completing her dissertation on the program. She did field visits, so we'll be reporting detailed studies. Just to quickly summarize, it depends greatly on the village. Those that are better run, with the interests of the villagers in mind, do a good job in organizing useful projects and providing the labor hours promised. Watch on NEP for announcement when the dissertation is done. Number 11. Like Greg B. above, I'd like to get any insights you may have on India's job guarantee. The article I think he is referring to is at this link. Obviously, reports of corruption come as no surprise, and I understand India's economic and political environments are not comparable to the US, but any info links you may have would be helpful. Answer. See my answer above. Yes, there will be cases. However, you must also understand that the mainstream media is always going to hype failures. After all, it is a for-profit sector and always hates the competition. Number 12. Randy's look at the job guarantee is in this post is very realistic, I think. But when considering the problems that will certainly arise, it's very important to always have in mind the cost of using an unemployment buffer stock. Bill Mitchell's very good on this here at this link and in other links in the above post. The cost is just staggering, and there's no way the possible cost of the job guarantee that come to mind even begin to approach in severity the cost Bill describes. Answer. Thanks, Joe. Agree completely, and thanks for links to Bill. Number 13. I have a few comments. First, replying dealing with embezzlement. I agree that plenty of use can be made of the internet. Use can possibly also be made of cell phones, mobile phones. In Nigeria, every other person has a mobile phone right now, and much of the embezzlement of Social Security money has been cut by crediting people's phones with Social Security money. However, another undesirable practice or form of embezzlement is using productive job guarantee employees for long periods as substitutes for regular employees whose wage would normally be funded by the nonprofit, etc. That was a problem under CETA, as I mentioned a few days ago. I don't think your post said much about that. A way around that problem is to prevent any given job guarantee employee staying with a given employer for more than a few months, though there are plenty of refinements to that few months rule that could be added. Next, your point near the end of your post about public goods, social benefits and costs, market prices, social efficiency, etc. Obviously, the market does not value public goods correctly, as you say. But we already have a system for dealing with that. It's called democracy. That is, anyone can campaign for and or vote for having a bigger proportion of GDP allocated to public spending. So I have doubts as to whether those setting up job guarantee systems have a right to overrule those democratic decisions. That is, assume that the electorate has voted incorrectly and that public goods are still undervalued. That's why I've always assumed when discussing job guarantee that the marginal product of labor in public and private sectors are the same, and that in turn is just one of the arguments for having job guarantee operate as much in the private as public sector. Though obviously you oppose the job guarantee operating in the private sector. Reply the millions of jobs which nonprofits, etc., can allegedly produce. Coffee once did some research into this. I can't quote chapter and verse. The response they got from nonprofits, local government, etc. was that there were strict limits to the amount of relatively unskilled and temporary labor they could use. The response of the coffee researchers was bizarre. Instead of accepting the empirical evidence that they themselves had collected, they accused the nonprofits, etc., of not being imaginative enough. Personally, I live in the 21st century, not the 13th. That is, I accept what empirical research shows, unless it is contradicted by other empirical research. You could argue that the above evidence is contradicted by the experience of Jefes, under which very large numbers were put onto job guarantee type work without too much difficulty. But my answer to that is that the given catastrophical high levels of unemployment, there is an ample supply of entrepreneurial and skilled labor amongst the unemployed. So getting people to run job guarantee projects is no problem. However, given catastrophical high levels of unemployment, much the best solution is a straight rise in aggregate demand, not job guarantee. That is because regular jobs, public and private sector, are more efficient than employer of last resort job guarantee jobs. Answer. Agree on the use of internet. CETA could hang on to employees only because they had no other options. Unemployment was high and there was severe competition to get a CETA job, as I can attest, precisely because it was not a job guarantee. Further, pay varied by job, so if you were lucky enough to get one of the high-paying jobs, it was hard for the private sector to attract you. I would not add any time rule to the job guarantee. No need for it. Job guarantee does not overrule democracy. It supports a human right. I see no good argument here for job guarantee jobs in the private sector. But if anyone ever comes up with some, I will listen. I am not inalterably opposed. I am somewhat familiar with the coffee research you mentioned, as I knew the student who undertook it, and I do not think you have accurately reported the results. In any case, that is a matter for Bill, not me. If the unemployed have entrepreneurial skills, I'd let them form worker co-ops, probably with a time limit to demonstrate profitability. Your last statement is just plain false, unless you mean for it to apply in the narrow market sense of profitability, but then it cannot apply to regular public sector jobs. As usual, the reference to efficiency is nothing but a hand wave. Number 14. Using productive job guarantee employees for long periods as substitutes for regular employees whose wage would normally be funded by the nonprofit. I'm not familiar with the nuts and bolts of CETA funding and operation, although I vaguely remember the acronym. Perhaps it allowed more opportunities for embezzlement than the job guarantee would do. People would be in the job guarantee for a long time, mostly need training, not just any old thing to do. They are not likely to be coveted as regular employees by nonprofits. I can't imagine a job guarantee employee staying for a long time in a job guarantee job if he is a suitable substitute for a regular employee. He would be one of the first to be hired out of the job guarantee by a regular employer at a higher wage. I guess he could be paid extra under the table, but that behavior seems more likely for a private sector employee than for a nonprofit. Answer. Golfer's last point is the obvious one. The job guarantee does not want to retain workers. It sells to a higher bidder. Number 15. Golfer. There would certainly be a tendency for relatively productive job guarantee employees to quit fairly quickly for regular work. On the other hand, in many countries, unemployment benefit and various in-work benefits for the lower paid are so high that those in the bottom third or so of the pay scales have little incentive to seek more productive work than they are currently engaged in. So my guess is that rules need building into the system that dissuade employers from holding on to job guarantee workers for too long. Answer. No. The job guarantee takes workers as they are and enhances their skills and employability, but it does not kick them out so long as they follow the work rules. Number 16. Given catastrophical high levels of unemployment, much the best solution is a straight rise in aggregate demand, not job guarantee. That is because regular jobs, public and private sector, are more efficient than employer of last resort job guarantee jobs. No, it's because you want a vibrant economy with a small pool of job guarantee workers, where more people can get jobs they aspire to and not be relegated to work that employers are not willing to pay for. Answer. And you don't want to stoke inflation, which you will do long before you ever get to full employment through pump priming. Number 17. Golfer, valid point, but it doesn't contradict my point, namely that efficient jobs are better than inefficient ones, all else equal. That is, if unemployment can be reduced by simply raising demand, that's the best way to do it rather than create job guarantee jobs because 1. The jobs created are more efficient, and 2. Your point, you get a bigger variety of jobs, which, as you say, enables more people to get the jobs they aspire to. Answer: looks like efficient hand waves to me. Efficiency is ill-defined and overrated. How efficient is it to leave 25 million unemployed, or almost as bad, to employ them on Wall Street?